For 500 years, the only thing holding this chaotic mess of German states together was a shared religion, Roman Catholicism. But in the early 16th century, that final pillar of unity shattered. The spark was struck in 1517 in the small university town of Wittenberg. An obscure Augustinian monk and theology professor named Martin Luther had grown profoundly disgusted by the corruption of the Catholic Church. This corruption was embodied by the Dominican friar Johann Tetzel, who traveled through German lands selling indulgences. Tetzel's famous slogan was, "As soon as the coin in the coffer rings, the soul from purgatory springs." Luther took a hammer and nailed his 95 theses to the heavy wooden door of the All Saints Church in Wittenberg. Written in Latin, he intended them as an academic critique of church abuses. He didn't want to start a revolution, he wanted to reform his faith. But Luther possessed a weapon that no religious rebel before him had: the printing press, invented by Johannes Gutenberg. Within weeks, Luther's theses were translated into German, printed by the thousands, and distributed across Europe. Luther argued that salvation could not be bought. It was a free gift from God through faith alone, sola fide. He translated the Bible from ancient Greek and Hebrew into vernacular German, using the expressive language of the common people. In doing so, he standardized the German language itself, creating a unified grammar for a deeply disunified people. The Pope excommunicated Luther, branding him a heretic. In 1521, the young Holy Roman Emperor, Charles V, called Luther to the imperial diet in the city of Worms. Standing before the most powerful rulers in the world, the lonely monk refused, famously declaring, "Unless I am convinced by the testimony of the scriptures, I cannot and I will not recant anything. Here I stand, I can do no other. God help me. Amen." Luther's defiance split Germany in two. The northern princes embraced Protestantism, seizing wealthy Catholic church lands. The southern princes, led by Bavaria and Austria, remained fiercely Catholic. The German identity was now fractured along religious lines, and the stage was set for the apocalypse. In 1618, the long-simmering tensions boiled over into open slaughter. It began with an event known as the Defenestration of Prague, where Protestant noblemen threw Catholic imperial representatives out of a third-story window of Prague Castle. They survived by landing in a deep pile of horse manure, but the dignity of the empire was broken. What followed was the 30 Years' War, the most destructive conflict in European history before the world wars of the 20th century. It quickly ceased to be a simple war about religion and became a brutal, cynical struggle for European supremacy. Foreign empires used Germany as their sandbox. Swedish armies under King Gustavus Adolphus marched from the north. Catholic French armies struck from the west to weaken their Habsburg rivals. Spanish and Austrian imperial troops ravaged from the south and east. Germany became a charnel house. Armies consisted mostly of mercenaries who were paid not in coin, but in the right to plunder. Military commanders like Albrecht von Wallenstein developed the doctrine of war feeds war, meaning armies sustained themselves by stripping bare the territories they occupied. They swept across the German countryside like swarms of locusts, burning villages, torturing peasants for their hidden food, and slaughtering livestock. Cannibalism became rampant in the ruined countryside. Disease, specifically typhus, dysentery, and the bubonic plague, followed the armies and killed more than the sword. By the time the war finally ended in 1648 with the Peace of Westphalia, the human cost was unfathomable. Some regions of Germany, particularly Mecklenburg, Pomerania, and the Palatinate, had lost over 50 to 60% of their population. Overall, more than 7 million Germans were dead. The Holy Roman Empire was reduced to a hollow ghost, its central power utterly destroyed as the treaty granted near-total sovereignty to each of the 300 individual German states. The fields were black, the cities were empty, and the psychological trauma of this catastrophe would haunt the German mindset for centuries. It left behind a deep, primal craving for order, security, and defense at any cost. Out of the ashes of the 30 Years' War, a new power began to rise from a place no one expected. Northeast Germany, a cold, swampy, infertile region known as Brandenburg, Prussia. Its soil was so poor, it was mockingly called the sandbox of the Holy Roman Empire. It had no natural borders, no mountains, no wide rivers to protect it from its powerful neighbors, Sweden and Poland. It had been utterly devastated. But Prussia had a line of rulers from the House of Hohenzollern who possessed a fanatical clarity of purpose. If geography did not give them a shield, they would build one out of human flesh. The transformation began with Frederick William, the Great Elector, who realized that a small state could only survive if it possessed a standing army. His grandson, King Frederick William III, known as the Soldier King, turned this idea into an obsession. He spent his reign from 1713 to 1740 hoarding money, drilling troops, and building an army disproportionate to his country's population. He hated luxury, wore a military uniform every day, and created a society where everything was subordinated to the needs of the military. He even created a legendary personal regiment called the Potsdam Giants, recruiting or kidnapping exceptionally tall soldiers from across Europe. Prussia was famously described not as a country that had an army, but as an army that possessed a country. The entire nobility, the Junkers, were forced into the officer corps, tying their loyalty directly to the crown. Absolute obedience, iron discipline, and bureaucratic efficiency became the Prussian state religion. In 1740, the Soldier King died, leaving this magnificent military machine to his son, Frederick II, who would go down in history as Frederick the Great. As a youth, Frederick had loved French literature, poetry, philosophy, and the flute. His brutal father had despised him for it, viewing him as weak, and had even forced Frederick to watch the decapitation of his best friend. But when Frederick took the throne, the poet vanished, and the ruthless military genius emerged. Within months of becoming king, Frederick saw a moment of weakness in Austria, ruled by a young woman, Maria Theresa. Without warning, Frederick marched his Prussian army into Silesia, Austria's richest economic province, and seized it. Maria Theresa spent the next 2 decades trying to reclaim her land, culminating in the 7 Years' War from 1756 to 1763. Prussia found itself surrounded by an alliance of the greatest powers in Europe: Austria, France, Russia, and Sweden. Prussia was outnumbered 10 to 1. Frederick fought with brilliant aggressive tactics, moving his smaller army rapidly along internal lines to strike his enemies before they could combine. By 1762, Prussia was exhausted, its treasury empty, Berlin plundered twice, and Frederick was carrying a vial of poison in his pocket. Then came the miracle of the House of Brandenburg. The Empress of Russia died suddenly. Her successor, Tsar Peter III, was a fanatical admirer of Frederick. He immediately pulled Russia out of the war and returned all conquered lands. Prussia had survived. It was now recognized as a European superpower, and the duel for the ultimate control of Germany had begun. While Prussia grew as a military power, German culture experienced an extraordinary golden age in quiet university towns and royal courts. Thinkers like Immanuel Kant transformed human philosophy with his critique of pure reason, arguing for human autonomy and reason. Composers like Bach perfected Baroque counterpoint, while Beethoven revolutionized classical music into an expression of intense emotion. Writers like Goethe wrote Faust, and Schiller penned poems of liberty that elevated German literature to global heights. But politically, the German lands remained fragmented. More than 300 separate states still existed within the decaying Holy Roman Empire.